Hello, today we're going to be doing looking at the respiratory system and the lungs on Purpose Games. This is the video number 2 of assignment 3 for anatomy. So we'll get started. The larynx is located here, otherwise known as your voice box. So this is it manipulates pitch and volume in your voice. The larynx houses vocal folds, brackets, well, you could call them vocal cords, which are essential for speaking. The vocal folds are situated just below where the tract of the pharynx splits into the trachea and oesophagus. Next we have the epiglottis, which is located here in between the larynx and the pharynx. It is normally pointed upward during breathing, and when it is underside functioning as part of a pharynx. So it works in conjunction with the pharynx. But during swallowing, elevation of the hyoid bone, which is part of your jaw, the larynx. As a result, the epiglottis folds down to a more horizontal position, with its superior side functioning as part of the pharynx. So every time you swallow, it goes down to more of a horizontal, and which allows things to pass through into your stomach, and also stops air getting into your stomach. Next we have the trachea, which is located just here. The trachea is commonly known as the windpipe. It is a tube about 4 inches long and less than an inch in diameter. In most people, the trachea begins just under the larynx, brackets voice box, and runs down behind the breastbones, which is your sternum. The trachea then divides into smaller tubes called bronchi and bronchiosus for each lung. Next we have the pharynx, which is just here. It is commonly referred as the throat. The pharynx is part of the digestive respiratory system. For the digestive system, its muscular walls function in process of swallowing, and it serves a pathway for the movement of food from the mouth into the stomach. So every time you swallow, it helps with the digestion. Every time you breathe, it helps with the respiratory into your lungs. Next we have the bronchioles. The bronchioles, or bronchiole, are in the pathways of which air passes through the nose into the mouth to the alveoli, which are also, you could call them air sacs, of the lungs, in which branches no longer contain cartilage or glands in the submuscula. They are branches of the bronchi and are part of the conducting zone of the respiratory system. And they're located just here. Just there. They're located just there. Next we have the bronchi. Bronchi anatomy and function to the bronchi. The bronchi, singularly known as the bronchus, are extensions of the windpipe that shuttle air from the lungs. I think of them as highways for gas exchange, with oxygen going into the lungs and carbon dioxide leaving the lungs through them. So air comes in and goes through here, goes through gas exchange, then leaves back there as carbon dioxide. Oxygen comes in, carbon dioxide leaves, and this is where the bronchi comes into play. Next we have the nasal cavity, which is in your nose, you can probably guess with nasal. The nasal cavity is a hollow space within the nose and skull. This is lined with the hairs and the mucous membrane. The function of the nasal cavity is to warm, moisturize, and filter air entering the body before it reaches the lungs. So basically, it filters any bacteria or anything in the air before it gets to your lungs, and it stops you from having lung problems because of the filtering of the moisture also adds better air quality to your lungs. Next we have the alveoli, which is the last one here, just down here. Gas exchange of the oxygen and carbon dioxide takes place in the alveoli. Oxygen from the inhaled air diffuses through the walls of the alveoli and adjacent capillaries into the red blood cells. This means that the oxygen that gets breathed in gets distilled and separated onto individual red blood cells. The oxygen is then carried to the rest of the body, into the muscle tissues, and this is what makes you work and performs better. Next we're going to be going on to the PowerPoint which I've produced, and yeah, see you then. Next we're on the PowerPoint of the principles of anatomy and physiology in sport. First of all, I'm going to talk about the three different sections of the cardiovascular system. These three parts are the heart and blood vessels. There are many sections of the heart, which I've shown you where they located in my video from the Pappas Games. So first of all, we have the aorta. The aorta is located at the top. The aorta is the main artery of the body. The role of the aorta is to supply oxygenated blood to our circulatory system. You can find the aorta in the left ventricle of the heart. The next is the left ventricle. The left ventricle is one of 4 chambers of the heart. The left ventricle receives blood from the right atrium and pumps this blood out at a high pressure to the body through the aorta. Next, the right ventricle. This is another one of 4 chambers of the heart. Its job is to supply deoxygenated blood to the lungs. It is located below the right atrium and directly opposite the left ventricle. The next is the superior vena cava. As you can see, there are two vena cavas, but the superior vena cava is found at the top of the heart. Through this tube, the heart receives deoxygenated blood from the upper half of the body. The deoxygenated blood enters the right ventricle of the heart. Next is the vena cava. The inferior vena cava. The role of the inferior vena cava is to carry deoxygenated blood from the lower half of the body to the deoxygenated blood in the right ventricle of the heart. Next is the bicuspid valve. The role of the bicuspid valve is to allow blood to only flow in one direction, which is through the left atrium. The left ventricle. Left atrium to the left ventricle. This is one of the valves of the heart, and the next one is the tricuspid valve, which forms a boundary between the right ventricle and the right atrium. It allows the blood flow only from the right atrium to the ventricle. This next is the pulmonary vein. This carries oxygenated blood from the lungs to the left atrium of the heart. The pulmonary vein is one of the only veins which carries deoxygenated blood. There are a total of 4 pulmonary veins which are in the heart. These are called the superior and inferior, left superior and left inferior. Next is the septum. The septum separates two chambers of the heart because one chamber contains deoxygenated blood, and the other chamber contains oxygenated blood. Next is the left atrium. The left atrium acts as a chamber to hold the heart. To hold the heart, and it holds all the blood which is returning from the lungs, and then it delivers the blood to the other places of the heart. If you're looking at the heart straight on, then the side which you think is the left is in fact the right atrium. Finally, the right atrium, which stores blood as well as deoxygenated blood, which enters the right atrium through the inferior and superior vena cava. Once the blood has entered, it then pumps right out to the right ventricle.